Welcome to this edition of the EXL Fantasy Football Show. I'm Derek Tate. Today we have a preview of the 2025 EXL semifinal round in the postseason to determine who will advance to the 2025 EXL Championship matchup. In the wild card round, it was full of drama and suspense. Both games, both wild card round matchups went all the way till the end of the Monday Night Football matchup between the Miami Dolphins and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it turned out that Week 14 regular season finale matchup between the Vikings and the Dudes for the number one overall seed had a little bit of a ripple effect because combined with the Speedsters' win, they secured the number two seed. The Dudes had to fight to survive in the EXL postseason after a 10-4 regular season and was atop the standings for a good amount of the year. They found themselves facing off against the Cazadors, and boy, was it a nail biter because it was the Dudes and the Cazadors that came down to Monday Night Football on the side for the Dudes in that matchup. It was, well, yeah, so we're taking a look, and it was the Cazadors, excuse me, who had to go to Calvin Austin III for the Pittsburgh Steelers because Drake London was hurt. And the wide receiver position was really what let down the Cazadors in this matchup, combined with Jalen Warren. Warren was actually questionable heading into the Monday night matchup, and he was dealing with some sort of illness. He split a lot of time with Kenneth Gainwell, and the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't do Jalen Warren any favors. It must have drove the Cazadors absolutely mad because the Pittsburgh Steelers had not one, but two tight ends score rushing touchdowns against the Miami Dolphins with Cameron Hayward and Jonnu Smith both punching in rushing scores in a opposition to the starting running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who finished with just 6.3 fantasy points. But it was more so Calvin Austin III. It was a nice day at the office for Aaron Rodgers, an efficient day, but one that simply did not get Calvin Austin involved whatsoever in the passing game. Finished with a goose egg. Zero. A no-show in this matchup in relief duty of Drake London. Now, also in that game for the Cazadors, and this really maybe would have been a Jalen Warren decision on Monday Night Football. He ended up being active. If he was inactive, it may have very well been likely that Darren Waller would have taken his place, who scored 25 fantasy points but remained on the bench. And that was the difference in the matchup, with the Dudes prevailing over the Cazadors 130 to 120. Wasn't a big day for Jonathan Taylor, but Josh Jacobs had a big outing. CJ Stroud and Bryce Young both had decent outings. The loss of Daniel Jones has been a big one for the Dudes over the final couple weeks of the regular season. It did not come back to bite them because Bryce Young did have himself a nice outing, 163 passing yards to go with one score and 49 rushing yards for 15 fantasy points. So the Dudes, although it was a nail-biter all the way down to Monday Night Football, and certainly the Cazadors with Jalen Warren and Calvin Austin and the Pittsburgh Steelers scoring 28 points, the Dudes had to sweat that one out quite a bit, but they do advance to the semifinal round to stay alive for the EXL Championship. And speaking of the EXL Championship, the other wild card matchup was a doozy because it was a rematch of the 2024 EXL Championship between the Degenerates and the Yachts. And it lived up to the hype, with both of these teams actually needing to secure a win in the regular season finale just to secure a top 5 seeding to return to the postseason in consecutive years. They both did so, edging out the holdouts and the Crushers in total points scored entering this match, or and to be able to secure their playoff berth. But they ran into each other in the wild card round, and it lived up to the hype. Another game that came down to the very final night on Monday Night Football, and certainly both teams were kind of sweating this one out, but it was the defending champions who edged out the Yachts by 3 points, 167 to 164, led by Travis Etienne, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Matthew Stafford, who continues to play crazy good football, MVP caliber stuff. The newly acquired Nico Collins also scored 24 fantasy points, caught 2 touchdowns on just 3 receptions for 85 yards. Olave continues to play well with Tyler Shuck. Really, Joe Burrow was the biggest disappointment in the starting lineup for the Degenerates, the defending champs. So you got to think moving forward that Joe Burrow, you expect him to play a little bit better. They were able to survive the yachts, though. Lamar Jackson only threw 12 passes last week. Now, he completed 8, 2 of them for touchdowns, 1 interception. So just the ball didn't quite bounce their way. Saquon Barkley had a nice game, but not an explosive one. Kyron Williams certainly did his part. Wan'Dale Robinson, Cortland Sutton, Jamison Williams, the receivers, all scoring north of 13 fantasy points in this contest. But Devontae Adams, the injury that probably cost him a couple extra points in that shootout against the Detroit Lions, that may have been the difference. Devon Achane did not find the end zone. He was busy on Monday Night Football, and it looked like in garbage time, he may be able to score just enough fantasy points to be able to get them over the hump. But unfortunately, DK Metcalf did not do much in that Monday Night Football matchup, but that long catch and run for a score was the difference as he scored 13 fantasy points to Devon Achane's 15.7. And again, the margin of error was just 3.04 fantasy points. And that's just how razor thin it was. But the Degens, the defending champions, advance to the semifinal round. And so let's take a quick peek at those semifinal round matchups, like a quick preview. And we already had one due to technical difficulties. Now we are recording this episode after the Thursday night game has been played between the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks, and it was an overtime shootout, 37-36 in favor of the Seattle Seahawks. But if you had a piece of either Puka Nacua or Matthew Stafford in this contest, well, then you're probably sitting pretty. And the Speedsters had Puka Nacua. And Puka Nacua even missed the first series due to team discipline. 46 fantasy points, 225 yards receiving, 2 scores, 12 receptions, a monster performance, one that could be the difference and help secure the first championship appearance for the Speedsters in their franchise history. And then, of course, Jackson Smith-Njigba, a casual 19 fantasy points, also 96 receiving yards, 8 receptions, and a score for him as well. So the Speedsters have already scored 70 points in this matchup. Now, the Dudes on the other end, they did put Zach Charbonnet into the starting lineup, and it paid off. Charbonnet with 15 fantasy points in this one, 32 yards rushing, 22 receiving, 4 receptions, also a rushing touchdown. So Charbonnet was far from bad in this contest. Now, one thing that maybe also worth considering, Colby Parkinson got the start for the Speedsters at the tight end position, only scored 4.1 fantasy points, just 2 receptions for 21 yards. Stafford threw the ball over the yard. It just, unfortunately, they utilized kind of a tight end by committee with also Terrence Ferguson and Dwayne Allen getting involved in the passing game. So it was an interesting performance for the Speedsters, the 3 starters. Parkinson kind of lays an egg, but Puka Nacua more than makes up for it with a career performance and a monster fantasy outing and a big moment for the Speedsters. Now, right now, projections still have this does favor the Speedsters now at 154 to 135, but still a lot of football left to be played. The rest of the starting lineup for the Dudes right now, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, both with favorable matchups at the against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Bryce Young and the Las Vegas Raiders for CJ Stroud. Josh Jacobs got to keep an eye on his health entering their Saturday night matchup against the Chicago Bears. A.J. Brown going up against the Washington Commanders, Khalil Shakir, Stephon Diggs, T.J. Hockenson, Chase Brown, and of course, Jonathan Taylor rounding out the rest of the starting lineup for the Dudes. And that may come down to Monday Night Football as well, because JT plays the 49ers on Monday Night Football to cap off the Week 16 slate of NFL action. Now, the Speedsters, they also have remaining in the starting lineup Jackson Dart, Ashton Genty, and RJ Harvey, a couple up and down rookies that have had some success, but also some duds throughout their rookie campaign. Jawan Jennings also drawing the start for the Speedsters, along with Terry McLaurin. Michael Carter having to kind of roll the dice with Rashee Rice in concussion protocol. That is potentially a big loss for the Speedsters. Fortunately, they have the depth at wide receiver that it didn't really affect this three starters, but it is something where Rice has been a fantasy force ever since returning from suspension so far this year. So potentially him out of the starting lineup would be a big loss. And then, of course, Trevor Lawrence, off of his 6-touchdown performance in Week 15. But in Week 16, he's going to be drawing a big matchup against one of the best defenses in the NFL, the Denver Broncos. So we'll take a look at the other semifinal matchup, and boy, it is a good one. The defending champions looking to secure back-to-back titles, the Degenerates, advancing to take on the number 1 seed and the top scoring team in the EXL in 2025, the Vikings. And when you look at the Vikings roster and why they are projected right now 141 to 135 over the Degens, it's because you look at some of the scoring format advantages that this team has had throughout the majority of the 2025 season. Josh Allen, Drake May is the best starting quarterback duo in this league. And so far this season now, we'll see how it plays out in week number 16. But when you start looking at the tight end position too, in a tight end premium format, Kyle Pitts went nuts against Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week number 15. Trey McBride's been a stud all year, and Brock Bowers is, well, Brock Bowers. So those three are also in the starting lineup. Emeka Buka, Lad McConkey, and George Pickens are the three starters at the receiver position, and then Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, the two starting running backs. Again, a pair of rookies, so similar to that of the Speedsters. That has been the approach for the Vikings throughout the majority of the year. Now, on the flip side, Jacoby Brissett, a starting quarterback for the Degenerates, along with Joe Burrow. Maybe a tough pill to swallow for the Degens. 35 fantasy points on the bench with Matthew Stafford. It was a tough matchup on paper. Devontae Adams was not available for this contest. They were on the road in inclement weather, and it didn't matter. Stafford threw for 457 and 3 scores, so 35 fantasy points on the bench for the Degens. But Jacoby Brissett has been playing great ball. His floor as a starter has been 249 passing yards and generally 2 scores. He's taken on the Atlanta Falcons. Joe Burrow looking for a bounce-back performance against the Miami Dolphins, who are going to be starting Quinn Ewers this week. Travis Etienne, Tyrone Tracy Jr., the 2 starting running backs, but of course you got Christian McCaffrey also in the starting lineup. So 3 tailbacks that have been playing pretty good ball for the Degens in the starting lineup. Now, DK Metcalf, Nico Collins, Chris Olave round out the starting receivers at the 3 receiver spots, and then Colston Loveland and Theo Johnson, the tight end for the New York Football Giants, round out the starting lineup. Now, again, very close in projections, which brings me along to my predictions. Now, prior, when this was recorded, to maintain take integrity, even though we had some technical issues, I predicted that it was going to be the Dudes over the Speedsters to advance to the championship round. I feel disingenuous if I were to change my pick despite Puka Nacua and Jackson Smith and Jigba absolutely going off. I'm going to stick with the Dudes. Now, it's going to take a monster performance from Jonathan Taylor and players like A.J. Brown and potentially Bryce Young outperforming his projections against a Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that has been giving up explosive plays all over the field over the last month of the season. So I'm still going to stick with the Dudes. I think this is going to be a really high-scoring matchup, though. I'm going to go 158 to 152. Dudes advance to the championship round. And then on the other end, the Vikings taking on the defending champions. They're all the way on the doorstep of getting back to a date with destiny, potentially trying to win back-to-back titles. but I think their journey ends just a bit short for the defending champs. Their bid for back-to-back falls short in the semifinal round against the Vikings. I got the Vikings 161 to 142 over the D-Gens. Still, we'll see how it all plays out. But right now, I've got the Vikings and the Dudes in a rematch of the season finale in the regular season. I could see a path where the Dudes give the Vikings a scare, but ultimately, Josh Allen, Drake May, the trio of starting tight ends in this tight end premium format, a nice collection of receivers, and two rookie running backs that are starting to really hit their stride, particularly with Travion Henderson. I just see the Vikings having a little bit too much firepower for the Dudes, who the potency of their starting lineup has been impacted because of Daniel Jones' injury. And that Daniel Jones injury also probably limits the amount of scoring opportunities that Jonathan Taylor sees. So that negative ripple effect, while maybe does not have a major impact in the semifinal round, I think it becomes an obstacle that's a bit too much to overcome for the Dudes. And I have the Vikings as EXL champions with a 171 to 151 victory over the Dudes next week. But hey, we got to see how it all play out. Originally, when I made my preseason playoff predictions, I got 4 of the 6 teams right. But of course, there were a lot of things I got wrong. So maybe I'll get these predictions wrong. Either way, it's going to be a lot of fun entering into the final couple weeks of the EXL. So until next time, everybody, later, says a tater.